how do sports performers, athletes, people doing physical activity of all kind, how do they actually conduct themselves? And I guess that comes down to their behaviour, right? What is their behaviour? And with this in mind, we're going to sort of analyse a couple of terms to see if we can start to use them in describing the behaviour and conduct of performers. The first term I want you guys to really get to grips with is the idea of etiquette. Okay, so I'm going to spell this out nice and clearly. We have got there Etiquette. Now, those of you that are studying a little bit of French will recognise the origins of this kind of word, but we want to know what is this and what role does it play in kind of like a sporting context. Well, the first thing I want you guys to grasp is this is what we would call a convention. Okay, now I'm not sure if convention in this context will be a word that you've come across before. A convention's something that kind of everyone implicitly agrees to and does, even though it's not a formal agreement and written down, okay? So what I would say there is this is an unwritten rule. Okay, an unwritten rule. You don't have to do it, but you'll notice what will happen if people don't do it. People get really quite upset. So let me give an example. And by the way, I happen to be recording this in 2021. I'm going to take no reference point of COVID and shaking hands and all this sort of stuff because, of course, I'm going to assume that when you watch this, shaking hands is a relatively normal thing to do. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But one of the things that etiquette is something like shaking hands. So whatever sport you're involved in, whatever activity, if it's competitive, consider what happens towards the end of your competition if the two participants, two teams, two coaches, whatever it happens to be, if they don't shake hands with one another, things kick off, right? Well, that's because etiquette has been broken. Another really nice one that you could mention here is something, and people don't always do this one as much, but it would be sort of congratulating an opponent. Okay, so let's say you could be that you've either won or lost and you want to say good game or well played or you had a good game today or, well done on the 3 points or whatever. Congratulate an opponent. It is only convention. It is not written, but people generally prefer you to do it than not do it, right? And you've probably seen numerous examples where someone's not managed to achieve this. This is what we refer to as etiquette. And by the way, etiquette is as relevant to adults as it is to young people taking part in sport. And some of the worst examples of lack of etiquette I've seen are from adults. So by no means is this something that should be sort of considered only relevant to young people. Now, we want to move this on. Now, I want to be clear here, folks. I have considered the next letters in my writing here being sportspersonship, but the term your exam board uses sportsmanship, so that's the one I'm going to stick with, okay, for here. Now, what is this sportsmanship thing? So we're going to call this conforming, so doing what you're meant to, conforming to the rules. Conforming to the rules. Okay, so this is to do with now written rules. Let me get rid of that little terrible S. Conforming to the rules, but also the spirit and etiquette. So this is both following that etiquette process, but it's also following the rules as well of the actual activity. So let's take this a little bit further. So for example, I want to use a football example. This could be kicking a ball out of play for an injury. So, this is an etiquette-based action. An opponent's injured, for example. I believe the current laws are that the referee is the one that determines whether the game should stop, but this is what we would do. Another great one would be shaking hands with an official. So very much based on the etiquette point, right? Shaking hands with official. Thanking the referee, umpire at the end of the game, at the end of the competition. Say, thanks for your time, appreciate your help today. These are good things to do. Get rid of that thing of being angry and frustrated. It's not helpful. What about this one? Not arguing with a referee. I think I even not arguing back, or we could say with a referee. Now that's a nice one to include in sportspersonship or sportsmanship. And a classic this one is, guys, is the idea, and if you're not sure what this means, I'll try and explain it to you, the idea of walking in cricket. Now, if you're not interested in cricket, you probably think there's loads of walking in cricket. Now, specifically, what we mean by walking in cricket is that and again, I'm going to use the term batsman here because the international, what's it called? I can't remember if it's the ECB or the international cricket body. They still recognise the term batsman. I have an opinion on this, feel free. But what we're saying here is that I'll use batsperson. If a batsperson knows that they are out, perhaps they just clipped the ball slightly, just nicked it, and it was caught, but no one else knows they were out, they walk and leave because they know themselves they were out. That's what we mean by walk. It's sort of like honesty plus, okay, and that's what it is, and that's a great example. If you're not sure about cricket, ask someone in your class to maybe give you some more examples of that who does know more about it. Now, we're going to finish off with gamesmanship. Again, could be gamespersonship, right? But let's stick with gamesmanship as that kind of traditional structure just for now. So what I want to sort of stress here is this is still within the rules, still not breaking the rules. So this is our kind of definition. Attempting to gain an advantage, by stretching the rules. So notice we're still within the rules. We are not breaking the rules. We are simply stretching the rules. Now try to think of examples in your own activities of what those things might be. So here's an example. We might have delaying play slightly. Okay, so this could be you're a tennis player, say, and you know your opponent likes to get on with things and play quite quickly. You just go a little bit slower. You know, you're not outside of the time constraints of the point, but you're just slowing the play down. Another example we might use something like exaggerating a foul. This is not against the rules, okay? You could argue it's against the ethics. I always forget how to spell exaggerate, it's double G. Exaggerating a foul. So it is a foul, but rather than sort of jumping back to one's feet, say you exaggerate it and take a little bit longer, and maybe this encourages the referee or umpire to take disciplinary action against the person who made the foul. And here's another one for you guys. I mean, it depends on the sport here. What about appealing for decisions? You know, this happens a lot in football. Oh, referee, did you see that? It was our ball, ref. Okay, appealing for decisions. It's not against the rules. I believe in rugby, actually, it's against the rules, so this would be different. But these are all examples of gamesmanship. They're within the rules, not breaking the rules, but they're stretching the rules. Now, I'm not going to go into this, guys, but if we were breaking the rules, and I'm not talking about making a foul or making an error, we would be getting into a notion of deviance. So make sure that you can differentiate between deviance and gamesmanship. Deviance is things like taking performance-enhancing drugs, making a professional or deliberate foul, being violent on the pitch. Say this is all deviance. That's not what we're talking about. And finally, guys, I'm going to do a whole other video on this. We also need to know that there's something called the contract to compete. Now, I'm not going to get into this here because there's a whole video separate on this, because I think it's important that we cover it. But this is about like how we conduct ourselves in the sense that we always try our best. We allow others to do the same, and we always play by the rules. And I'll come back to that in another tutorial. Thanks.